I left Kano, Nigeria, with a dream and a small bag. I had heard the stories, how people crossed the Sahara Desert into Libya and somehow made it to Europe, but no story prepares you for the reality. This journey is one of the deadliest paths anyone can take. Crossing the Mediterranean Sea is not just dangerous, it's a gamble with life itself. There were nights in the desert and long, endless hours on the water where survival didn't even make sense. The odds were against us. Honestly, I never knew if I would live long enough to tell this story. But in the silence of fear, something changed. When my body felt like giving up, my spirit refused to break. I didn't just find a way to Europe. I discovered a version of myself I never knew existed. A strength that had always been there, waiting for the hardest moments to bring it out. This is what it feels like to realize you are stronger than even the world's most dangerous journey. When Musa and the others finally reached Libya, exhaustion clung to them like a second skin. The journey across the desert had already stripped them of comfort, dignity, and certainty. But what awaited them was no relief. The smugglers who had guided them from Nigeria herded them into what they called a way house, a temporary camp hidden deep in the bush. The place was anything but a refuge. It was overcrowded, filthy, and suffocating. Dozens, sometimes hundreds, of migrants were crammed into makeshift shelters built from scraps of wood, torn tarpaulin, and rusted metal sheets. The air carried a constant stench of sweat, waste, and despair. Clean water was scarce. Food, when it came, was barely enough to survive, often stale bread or thin porridge shared among many. Hunger became a daily companion. At night, fear took over. The camp was exposed, vulnerable to attacks from local militia groups who raided without warning. Sometimes they came for money, sometimes for violence. Those who had hidden cash or valuables risked losing everything. Those who had nothing still paid, with beatings or worse. Corruption thrived in the shadows. Armed police officers would arrive under the cover of darkness, not to protect, but to extort. They demanded bribes from the migrants, money they barely had. Those who couldn't pay were threatened, detained, or abused. The line between authority and criminality blurred until it disappeared completely. Within the camp itself, survival bred desperation. Sexual exploitation was common, especially among vulnerable women who were often coerced into exchanging their bodies for protection, food, or a chance to move forward. Abuse went unspoken but was widely understood. There were no systems of justice, no one to report to, no escape. Drugs circulated quietly but steadily. For some, they offered a temporary escape from the harsh reality, a way to numb the hunger, the fear, the trauma. For others, they became another trap, tightening the grip of the camp around them. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. After 3 long months, Musa and the others were told they were moving again, this time across the Mediterranean Sea, to Italy, to Europe, to the dream they had been chasing. But this next step was not hope. It was a gamble with death. They were packed into overcrowded, fragile boats, often inflatable or poorly constructed wooden vessels, never meant to carry such weight across such a vast and unforgiving sea. Life jackets were scarce or defective. Many could not swim. Yet they boarded anyway, driven by the belief that turning back was no longer an option. The Mediterranean crossing is not just dangerous, it is one of the most perilous journeys in the world. Waves can rise without warning, boats capsize, engines fail. People disappear into the water without a trace. Some are rescued, many are not. For Musa and countless others, this was the final test. A journey where survival was uncertain and hope was the only thing keeping them afloat. Libya was not like this. Under Muammar Gaddafi, the country was ruled with an iron hand, yet it maintained a certain order. The government was centralized, strict and heavily controlled, but basic systems functioned. Oil wealth sustained the economy, and despite political repression, Libya was relatively stable compared to what it would later become. Everything changed after the 2011 Libyan civil war, and with the fall of Gaddafi, the country descended into fragmentation. Rival governments, militias, and armed groups took control of different regions. Law and order collapsed. Smuggling networks flourished in the chaos, turning human lives into commodities. Migrants like Musa were no longer just travelers. They were trapped in a system of exploitation, abuse, and survival. On a cold, uncertain morning, the smugglers made an announcement. The batch Musa came with would be leaving Libya through the Mediterranean the following day. A heavy silence fell over the camp. It was a horrible moment, but it had become a matter of life and death. There was no turning back. Musa and his fellow travelers had already made up their minds. Europe was the destination, no matter the cost. Hope was all they had left, hope against hope. That night, as preparations quietly unfolded under the cover of darkness, Musa could not sleep. His mind wandered far away from the Libyan shores. He thought about his mother, her gentle voice, her prayers. He thought about his little sister in Kano, her laughter, her innocence. A painful thought gripped him. What if I don't make it? Fear crept in like the cold night air. With no answers and no certainty, Musa turned to God, whispering silent prayers for protection, for mercy, for another chance at life. At dawn, they were hurried toward the shoreline. There the dinghies waited, small, fragile, overwhelmed even before departure. Each boat was meant to carry 40 people, but more than 60 were forced into Musa's. Men, women, the elderly, and even mothers clutching sucking babies were packed tightly together, their bodies pressed against one another, their breaths heavy with fear. As the engine roared to life, the sea responded. The waters were restless. The waves rose like dark hands, threatening to swallow everything in their path. The dinghy trembled violently as it cut through the unstable waters, each crash of the wave sending panic through the passengers. Some cried, some prayed, some sat in silence, already surrendering to fate. Hours passed like days. The cold bit into their skin. The uncertainty gnawed at their souls. Then suddenly, a scream pierced through the chaos. A young woman had dozed off, exhausted beyond her limits. In that brief moment of unconsciousness, her child slipped quietly from her grasp and disappeared into the unforgiving sea. For a second, there was disbelief. Then came the horror. The mother's scream tore through the air, raw, broken, unforgettable. She lunged forward, but it was too late. The sea had already claimed the child. Panic erupted. People shouted, some reaching helplessly into the water, others turning away, unable to bear the sight. The waves continued their ruthless dance, indifferent to human sorrow. It was a scene of pure devastation, a moment that would haunt every survivor forever. Just when hope seemed completely lost, a distant sound emerged above the chaos. Engines, stronger, steadier, heads turned. Through the rising waves, a vessel appeared, cutting through the sea with authority. It was the Coast Guard, responding to distress signals along the dangerous crossing toward Italy. Relief and disbelief collided. Some began to cry, not out of fear this time, but out of fragile hope. The rescue was not easy. The sea fought back, tossing both boats violently, but one by one, the passengers were pulled to safety. Musa, trembling and exhausted, felt a firm hand grab his arm and lift him aboard. He collapsed onto the deck, breathing heavily, his body weak but alive. Alive. As he lay there, staring into the open sky, one thought echoed in his heart. God had answered, but the cost of that journey, the screams, the loss, the faces, would never leave him. Even as we discuss the journey through the Sahara Desert to Libya and across the Mediterranean Sea to Europe, we must be clear, no one should be encouraged to take such a devastating risk. While a few have reached the other side, tens of thousands have perished on these routes over the past decade. The statistics are haunting. Since 2014, more than 30,000 migrants have been recorded as dead or missing in the Mediterranean Sea alone. On land, the Sahara remains one of the world's most perilous crossings. In 2024 and 2025, hundreds of deaths were officially documented, though the true number is likely much higher, hidden by the vastness of the desert. Those who do not make it are often ruthlessly buried in the unforgiving depths of the sea or lost beneath the shifting sand dunes of the Sahara. Far too many are left to the vultures and wild animals. To the youth of Africa and other developing nations, desist from taking these unnecessary risks. You must understand that money is not simply plucked from the streets of Europe. Success requires immense labor, and it takes time to navigate a foreign system. If you wish to relocate abroad, do it the right way. Process your visa, meet the legal requirements, and protect your life. No better life is worth a journey that ends in a nameless grave.